starts in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go.
Hello, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Hospitality Tech Show Incorporated. This is where hospitality meets innovation, and this is where we bring together the brightest minds transforming the industry through technology. My name is Alma. I am one of the co-hosts here. Tonight, our host, Michael Woodson, will be joining us shortly. And tonight is episode number 19, and we are diving into a crucial topic that every hospitality professional needs to master. This is how to lead a seamless tech implementation in hospitality. And whether you are rolling out a PMS, a CRM, or a payroll system, implementation can either boost your operations or slow them down. And tonight's guest knows exactly how to help you get it correct and get it right. We are honored to welcome Miss Jaclyn D'Angelo. She is the implementation project manager at Otelier, a cutting-edge hospitality data platform that integrates property management, business intelligence, and automation tools to make sure that you streamline hotel operations. She has over 13 years of hotel operations experience, and Ms. Jaclyn brings a rare combination of frontline knowledge and tech expertise. She's a planner by nature, and she's known for creating seamless onboarding experiences, translating complex software into practical tools that hospitality teams can confidently use every day. Her mission is to empower hoteliers through clear training, simplified workflows, and thoughtful strategies that lead to strong adoption and long term success. So make sure that you grab your notepads because this episode is going to be packed with many insights and real world takeaways that you can apply immediately. And before we begin, we are proud to share that the Hospitality Tech Show is now officially a 501 nonprofit organization. Yay, 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 yay. Clap it up. If you're interested in partnering or supporting the mission to connect hospitality and technology, please feel free to reach out at hospitalitytechshow@gmail.com. And we would also like to take this opportunity to thank our generous donors, Mr. Danny Barnett, the Vice President at IBM, and David Pop. I want to thank you both for your incredible support in helping to grow this platform. And now, without further ado, please join me in welcoming the brilliant and dedicated Jaclyn D'Angelo to the show.
Thank you, Amel. I'm happy to be here today.
Good evening. How are you doing?
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us and to share a wealth of knowledge with our audience. As I mentioned, Mr. Michael's going to be joining us a little bit later, but we are going to go ahead and get started. We have a plethora of questions for you. Hopefully, time allows us to get through them all. As mentioned today, we are going to be focusing on how to lead a seamless tech implementation in hospitality. So we're going to be talking about everything from best practices to the actual methods that you use to getting your training staff on board. So we're going to dive right into it. Okay.
Great.
Awesome. My first question for you actually is how do you determine whether a hotel is ready for a new PMS or CRM system? What does that look like?
It really just depends on whether what you currently have is working for you. If you're spending more time trying to just make the PMS or the whatever technology you're using work rather than using it just to support you in helping your customers and provide good experiences, then it's time to look at something new.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. What would you say? What would be the first step actually into implementing something new?
Once you've made your decision on what you want to implement, you want to communicate that with the teams that are going to be using it. It's really important that they know that there's going to be a change coming, as that helps you manage the change, and it's going to help you with getting adoption later on and making sure everybody uses it and is excited to use it. Uh, yeah, so that's going to be your first step. But you also want to like learn what is important to your team,
Mm-hmm.
and so that you can focus on that in the implementation. You want to make sure that that is something that you've purchased and that that's going to be implemented, that you want it to be useful. If it has all the bells and whistles, it can have everything. But if it doesn't have the feature that your team really needs, it's not going to work for them and they're not going to want to use it.
Okay, thank you for that. That was actually going to be my next question, which was how important it is for them to be, involved in it. And so that's a great point that you have. You mentioned making sure that you let them know ahead of time. What would you say is the an appropriate timeline in informing the team? What would be?
Depends on the type of tech you're going to be implementing. I mean, a PMS, you're going to need a lot of time to prep for it, as far as updating or backing up your current information, because you're going to want to migrate that over. You don't want to lose all of your information. You also need to know who is going to be using it ahead of time, because you want to have that prepared so that it's not a last minute thing where you're implementing the users or creating users. You want people to have access as soon as it goes live. So you need to know who's going to be doing things.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit of maybe can you just kind of walk us through what an ideal implementation process would look like?
Yeah, so I like to start with a kickoff call between the project manager from your vendor and the key stakeholders that are going to be at your property and using the system, and walk through the process together so everyone knows exactly what's going to be coming and an approximate timeline for when that's going to happen. And then you start scheduling out the different pieces, like building the different integrations and loading anything that needs to go on to the servers, or if it's cloud, gathering all the information and configuring all that data in the cloud. Then you're going to do testing and make sure that everything has come over correctly. Any data that you're gathering, that it's coming through daily as it's supposed to, and that the data is correct. So you're going to do validation at that point as well, and make sure everything matches the way that's supposed to. And then you want to have a rollout plan for training and get your team on board. I like to start with training a few key people that I consider like early adopters, so they become experts at the property. And then you roll out the training to the rest of the team and who's going to be using the software, so that after the training's been completed and you start using the new software, there's somebody that at the property that people can ask questions to if they have anything or if they run into any trouble.
Okay, thank you. And speaking of training, since you brought that up, what would you say are your top 3 training recommendations for preparing hotel staff?
Provide them an overview beforehand, again, so they know what's coming, what it's going to look like. If they could take a look at the website, see things beforehand. You want to record the training, absolutely, and make sure everyone has access to that afterwards. And as I said, have an early adopter or two at the property who understands it early on and can be there for answering any questions.
Okay. And when you're going through that training and you have to make some adjustments, how do you do that? How do you adjust your approach between the different departments and the personnel versus the front desk? What adjustments would you?
Yeah, I try to break it up between the departments so they each have their own training, if possible. If
Oh,
it's only a couple people in each department, you can bring it together. But you do want to focus on the different features and explain that this feature is going to be most useful for the housekeeping department because it has this, or this is going to be beneficial for the front office because this feature is going to be used there, and things like that. And then I also like to have someone be able to basically drive and work. So everyone should have access at that point, and then be able to go in and have one of the new users share their screen so you can actually walk them through it, because I think that helps people learn really well as well.
awesome. And you mentioned, I think that's a great way to have everybody, buy into what you're implementing. I'll just ask in general, how do you get non-technical team members to buy into what is being implemented? Any other strategies?
I explain how it's going to benefit them, whether it's streamlining processes or fewer clicks or things that they need to do, or even automation. And that's going to take away a task that it was taking up time that allows them to get back to working with customers and what they want to be doing.
Okay. And for those who may, um, you know, not be on board, or for those who may not just easily transition, what are some things that you would suggest to reduce resistance among personnel
Um,
if they run into that?
it's really key just to really reiterate how it's going to help them. I mean, there's always ways to do, like by adding a KPI as far as adoption, that using it is part of a bonus structure or things like that. But I feel like that kind of can uh, make it less likely for them to really want to adopt it, and doesn't exactly always help morale. I think just showing that it is going to help them and benefit them is really the best policy.
Really the best thing. What's my next question for you is, what strategies do you use to ensure that communication flows across all departments?
I use all the tools available, whether it's having meetings and bringing everyone on, and you reiterate it through several meetings if you do stand-ups, or if you have monthly meetings with your staff or anything along those lines. Bring it up a few times ahead of time. Make sure people have time to ask questions and give input during that time. And you want to always follow up with emails so people have something that they can reference and go back to.
Okay. And how do you balance everyone's expectations? So now you've made it clear how it will benefit everyone. How do you then balance the expectations of everyone across board?
It's really just showing everybody what they're going to be doing in the system, what they are going to use it for. Obviously, everything is not going to it's not going to be everything for everyone. So,
Hmm.
so some people may get what they want, other people might not, or and vice versa, and different things. So you just have to talk it through and make sure people understand, but also make sure that they understand that it is happening either, so if they may have objections or whatever, but you've already made the decision at this point. So not too much input, but enough input.
That's a great point to make. Can you share with us a time when there was a strong collaboration between everyone really helped avoid a failed rollout? Do you have a specific something that you can think of?
Yeah, I mean, rollouts generally, I mean, don't fail. They take longer than expected.
Mem-
But when you run into those issues or blockers, it helps to bring in other team members that can assist, and that could be on the vendor side or within on the property side. And sometimes just bringing in a fresh set of eyes is really helpful too, to take a look at it and maybe explain things in a different way to people to help things move along. And just people with different skill sets depending on what the blocker is. If it's a technology blocker, you might need to bring in a different person from your IT team or something along those lines.
Okay, thank you for that. What I'm really hearing a lot of you reiterating this is that communication is very key.
Yes.
Uh, Communication across the departments is very, very key in this. What so so what would be some common mistakes you would say that hotels make during tech implementation?
Not understanding what they want to get out of the software that they're implementing.
Mm-hmm.
Because if they don't know what they want, it may not be implemented correctly. It may not have what they need. But
Mm-hmm.
also understanding what they currently have, what technology they have, because if you're not sharing correctly, like what other software you're using, you might not be able to integrate them well, because
Mm-hmm.
you don't want to have systems that don't talk to each other at all. Then you're going here for this and there for that, and you're all over the place. So if you can when you get new technologies, use things that can integrate well. Um, That's going to be really useful for your property. And so you need to understand that ahead of time, because when you start the implementation, it's almost not too late, but it
Okay.
is a little bit, could cause a change of scope in the project.
Okay. So outside of what you just mentioned, which is not understanding, what you currently have and what you're looking forward to and, what you're expecting and also things like communication, are there any other reasons why some tend to fail? Well, not fail, but like you said, prolong the process.
Part of it could be people not being on board. Sometimes when you are integrating with other vendors, there you do run into things that don't work well together, or there's systems that you may already have on property that aren't functioning correctly, which makes it a little bit difficult. And it all depends on what exactly it is that you're implementing as well. But if you're trying to integrate with, say, your payroll system into some sort of like a business intelligence tool, if you don't have the correct setup in your payroll system, it's not going to talk to the new system correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So those things can cause problems, or also issues of access. If you're trying to bring in data from your PMS into a different tool, and you don't have access to be able to get reporting from your PMS, then you're maybe not going to be able to complete that correctly. And then you may have to go to support for your PMS and things like that. And that causes delays.
Okay, makes sense. How can, in the event that something like that happens, how can teams recover quickly from some of these unexpected
Yeah,
pitfalls?
you're going to leverage your different avenues of support. So whether it's an internal thing with your IT team or you're going to your PMS or other vendor support, they'll usually be able to walk through those kind of issues. And so it's better to know those things going in and make sure you have like high level accesses, so passwords, or somebody on property has the password to the PMS.
Okay, and is there anything you would say that that hotels should avoid in general to just avoid any of these pitfalls from happening? Are there any just like hardstone things to avoid?
Um, Not necessarily avoid, but I would say you want to manage your user access in all of your different software that you use. It's really important for security, but it's also important when you're changing software or migrating or integrating, that you don't have 1,000 users that are available to access your system when you have 30 people working in your team,
Mm-hmm.
because it makes things more difficult to find. So keeping user management and access management is really important.
Okay, that was great. We're going to, and before we kind of switch gears a little bit, I would like to ask, are there any risks you would say when switching multiple systems at once? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, of course, and in all technology, there's always risks that something doesn't work when you
Hmm.
start it. That, it happens, and so especially when you're doing multiple at once, they could be, any one of them could fail in the integration, and so you need to be prepared for that. Have a backup plan.
Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit and talk about post implementation and optimization, if that's okay. What would you say a successful post launch support plan looks like?
So I like to have what I would call office hours,
Okay.
where, yeah, so that somebody, either an early adopter at the property, or if you're working still with your vendor and they are part of your post rollout process, that a couple times a week you just have an open session where people can come with questions or issues that they're having with the software, and there's not necessarily a schedule or an agenda for it. It's just any questions that people might have, and just for that follow up, because sometimes going through it one time and going through a pre-planned process doesn't catch all the questions that people might have that come up. And just keep that going for a week or so after the implementation. But then you also want to keep all your resources in an easy, accessible place that everybody can find and knows about. And so that's going to be your recording of your training sessions,
Hmm.
documentation that there is on how to use the software, and you want to make that available to everybody. And then also check in with your people. Make sure that they are understanding things, that they're getting more comfortable, because you don't want to find out 3 months down the road that they're not doing something that they're supposed to be doing, or they're doing it in a way that is making it harder for them than it needs to be, and that they could have been in a much better position down the line because they didn't ask any questions.
Okay, great. How do you then ensure that everyone continues to use the system effectively after going live?
Yeah, again, checking in, um, having talks about compliance with the systems. You want to do periodic cleanups and just see how people are using it. You can check in on most systems and see when people have logged in, or and how often they do things like that. But and just talk to your team, make sure that they are, again, comfortable, that they're using it. And if you need to, at some point, you can again use KPIs on the systems as far as, keeping clean data or things like that.
Okay, thank you for that. My next question for you is what metrics, speaking of KPIs, what metrics or KPIs should hotels track after the tech rollout?
Yeah, so it depends on what you're using. So I'm going to speak a little bit to the company that I work for, Otelier. We do paperless. One of our solutions is a paperless night audit. So you can look at your team's compliance, whether you're a hotel management company overseeing multiple hotels or just one hotel. But you can look at and make sure in our system that that reports are being loaded as needed for the night audit every night. So that's, one way to do it is there's often features built into the software that you're using to allow that kind of uh, KPI or that kind of tracking. And as I mentioned earlier, you can also look and see who's logging in, or depending on what you're using, it could just be a matter of, seeing the data in the system. If it's not there, then somebody is not doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned earlier that everything has been said, and you want opinions, but not too many, I guess. How do you handle the feedback afterwards?
Yeah,
Can you speak a little bit to that?
sure. Yeah, sure. Always listen to the feedback, and oftentimes people's feedback is something that can be changed, whether it's a configuration change to your software or just how things are being used. So those things are important to listen to and check to see if it is something that's easily solvable. And if it's not something that's solvable, that you won't or wouldn't be able to implement, then it's figuring out a way to work with the person and make them more comfortable with what is available to them.
Hmm. And I'm assuming that with everyone that you work with, I mean, the feedback is completely fine afterwards. Everything is pretty smooth after.
We try.
It's pretty smooth. What would you say? What's your best advice that you would give for hotels planning a tech upgrade in the next year? Well, can you give a little bit of advice?
Yeah. I mean, do your research.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out what it is that you're really going to need, what's going to be good for your team, what's going to make your lives easier, um, and what's going to, bring you back to working with your customers, which is what you want to do, and take you out of having to really pay so much attention to your technology, because it should be there to support you, not, not a drag, not something holding you chained to your desk. So figure out what it is that's going to help you get back to your customers, and then find what fits that, what fits for your company, what fits for your team. But
Okay.
yeah, knowing what you need, what you want is really the important first step.
Okay. Thank you for that. That was very straightforward. Once again, we want to shift gears a little bit and talk about the actual technology integration and selection. If that's okay. My question for you is, what criteria should hotels use when selecting? That's a very good one. What should they use when they're trying to select a new PMS or CRM?
Yeah, again, it's going to be, you need to know what your team needs and what you're going to want them to do with the software. CRM is just so important too, to keep track of your customers and be able to communicate with them. And um, but yeah, you just want to, what works for you is the most important part.
Okay. Okay, and how would you how would you evaluate it? How would you evaluate whether the system integrates well with the existing tools?
Again, take a look at what you have currently,
Okay.
and most software companies will talk to you or tell you exactly what they can integrate with ahead of time. And that doesn't necessarily mean a blocker if they don't have one of your tools. A lot of companies will work with you, and they could potentially build big new integrations, especially if it's one that's becoming really popular.
Hmm.
So you just want to make sure that they work with the tools that you already have or can in the future. So knowing what you use is really important.
Okay. How do you, for the ones that you have selected, how do you ensure that they are scalable in the future?
Uh, Talking to other customers
Okay.
of the vendor, see that are using it, and finding out what other customers use, because it's more scalable if they have really big, if Marriott is the customer, that they can probably work with you. But if
Hmm.
all of their customers are small boutique hotels, that might be something that you want to talk a little bit more about and dig into.
Okay. And are there any, when it comes to selecting vendors, are there any red flags that you can say for companies to look out for that
If
come
they
to mind?
won't give you information on integrations and things like that,
Mm,
if they don't want to tell you the process, or if they say yes to everything, um,
mm,
a lot of times that means that not everything is there yet. And so you
okay,
may be working with them, building new things.
that makes sense. So too many yeses up front, and then also not enough information. So a
Yeah.
balance in the middle is what you're saying. Um, how I guess what would you say? What is your approach to when you're choosing between cloud based versus on premise system? How can they make that decision?
I think that on-premise systems work better for hotels that have a dedicated IT team on site, because you need somebody to be maintaining that hardware. Um,
Okay.
yeah, but cloud-based, if you're a small property or you don't have on-site IT, you don't have somebody that can work with those kind of systems for you, cloud-based is probably going to be better.
Okay, that makes sense. Um, Thank you so far. And just a reminder to everyone, if you have any questions, make sure to share them. We will be asking later on. We're going to shift gears once again and talk a little bit about cross departmental impact now, Ms. Jaclyn. My question for you is, how does a PMS implementation affect departments beyond the front office?
Yeah, so your PMS is where you're keeping track of what rooms are in use, whether by guests, or out of service, or being cleaned, potentially. So that's going to be where you're sharing your information from, to your housekeeping team or to your engineering team. So that they know, the housekeeper knows this person's checked out, so we can go clean this room, or engineering knows that they've checked out and they can go paint.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so really, most teams are going to have some look in your PMS, even to your outlets. If you offer, uh, breakfast packages or things like that, they're going to be looking. The restaurant's going to look at your reservation to see if that's what's used, or if they're not looking at it themselves, you may just be printing out reports from it, but they're still going to be needing that information.
Great, understood. What would be the best way, speaking of all the different departments, what's the best way to coordinate all of them, whether it's the IT department, housekeeping, finance, and operations during the tech transition?
Um, I like to have, at least for my team as a vendor, um, a Teams channel specific to the migration or the change or the implementation. So, and even when I was in the hotel, that way everybody sees all of the information that comes through. People can ask questions, and then the best person is asking the question, not just whichever random person that you reached out to. So having just one channel for everyone to be able to communicate with each other about it is really important and helpful.
Okay. Um, so how then do tech rollouts differ in independent hotels versus in branded properties?
Branded hotels generally have more regulations on different things. So it may be what features can be used in a piece of software, or what level of access the users have within their PMS, or things like that. And even down to what vendors they can actually use. Some brands do really control that. Um, and so independent, they have a little bit more leeway in what they choose and how they do things, because they're the ones that are making those decisions. It's not coming from the brand.
Okay. And how can a tech upgrade improve the guest experience directly, whether in both settings?
It makes the guests' interactions with any of the employees more seamless, because everybody has data right at their fingertips. Then you can also use your technology, depending on what your type you're using, to keep track of special events for uh, repeat guests, or your CRM tool can let you know that, oh, this guest that's checking in, it's their anniversary or someone's birthday, or they're allergic to shellfish, or they really love this one chocolate dessert that you have at the restaurant. So if you wanted to you know give them a delightful surprise, you can give them something that they like, by keeping track of that kind of information.
That's very nice. That's very nice for the customer experience. With when it comes to other establishments, like more of like boutique hotels and luxury hotels, what specific challenges would you say that the luxury or the boutique hotels face that others may not?
They don't always have the budget especially of a big box hotel, so they have to be very careful about what technology they're getting, because if they're spending too much on one, they might not be able to get something else that they need. Um, and one thing to look for, especially if you are budget conscious and you might need a few different things, is there's a lot of different companies now that are producing software that does several different things. It's like having a kitchen gadget. Like if you have a
Hmm.
garlic crusher, it only does one thing, but you can get a food processor and it lets you crush your garlic, but you can do all kinds of things with it. So the same thing with technology. You may want to find something that allows you to um, do a few different things and combine them into one.
Okay, thank you for that. Once again, we want to remind everyone to please put your questions in the chat if you have one, and we will get to it shortly. Switching gears to guest data and guest privacy, since we're talking about the guest experience, my question for you is, how do you handle guest data privacy, which is so important during a transition?
Yeah. So you are going to have to back up the data, but you want to do it in a secure way, from
Hmm.
like a current system that you're using if you're transitioning. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, security in general is just so important. So you want to use all of the security tools that you have at your disposal to move things over. And part of that, though, is what I had kind of touched on a little bit previously, was your user management. You want to make sure that the only people that have access and have credentials are people that actually are supposed to, and that that still need access. So managing who can see things it's just so important. And a lot of teams use this time when they're doing some sort of a transition or bringing on a new technology to audit what's happening with their users and get rid of anybody that's no longer needed. you know it's not great to go in and find that this person that was fired 5 years ago still has active credentials into your PMS.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. What would you say is best practice for migrating guest history from the old system to the new one? I know you mentioned again limiting the access. Is there any other thing that you can speak to that?
Yeah, that's really that, and just keeping a backup, making sure the files don't get corrupted, maybe do two backups if you need to, or multiple times, and make sure it's on a server or computer or however you're backing it up. Make sure that it's not overloaded, that it's, that you have space for the data. That's a
Hmm.
really big one, because if you try to back it up and it runs out of space, you're going to lose things.
Makes sense. How would you, I guess I should ask, how should the hotels train the staff on using, this is a really good one, the guest data ethically and sincerely? What would you say to that?
Yeah, you have to create SOPs and make sure as part of the rollout you're conveying those to everybody. You offer that as part of your training on using the systems, and it should be something that's just drilled into generally in working in a hotel, is not sharing any guest information.
Great. And I liked what you said earlier about just having like the recorded trainings, like, and keeping everybody once again on board. Again, I'm hearing you really, really stress communication and just having clear lines. And so,
Yeah, clear lines of communication, clear on expectations, and make sure everybody understands what's happening.
yeah, I guess the simpler, we say the simpler, the better? Is that like a kind of a theory we can go with that on?
Yeah, you want to keep things from being too complicated,
Hmm.
especially to get buy-in from people. If
Hmm. That makes
processes are
sense.
too complicated, if
Yeah.
yeah, if it gets once things get complicated for people, then they tend to tune out or
Hmm.
do as little as possible as they can, can get away with, because they don't understand it.
Yeah. And so, speaking to that, should the entire process, would you say, try to make it as short as possible as far as like the going live aspect?
Yeah, yeah, you want to keep it pretty short. You don't want to do the training too far in advance of the
Hmm.
go live, because people will forget. But you do want to give them enough time to familiarize themselves before it's live. But yeah, a shorter implementation is better. And obviously, it depends on what you're implementing. Some things are going to take longer than others, just by nature, depending on the amount of data that you have. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah.
Assuming that everything kind of just goes according to plan, what do you think is the expected timeline that everything just kind of just runs seamlessly on its own? And can you speak a little to that, or is it different for
That's
everyone?
Yeah, it's so different depending on what it is. I've done some implementations that take 2 weeks, and I've done
Mm,
things that have taken a year or longer. It just
yeah.
depends. Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense. Um, as far as the CRM, how do the CRM systems, would you say, help improve the personalization while staying compliant as well? Can you speak a little
Yeah.
bit to that?
Yeah, so I kind of touched on that in a couple places before, and so one is stay compliant by only allowing people that are supposed to have access. A lot of them let you hide certain data from some
Hmm.
users, so depending on their access level. So you want to utilize those types of features. But then you can use things that aren't necessarily private, that the customer has shared with you, like as I said, birthdays or preferences or special events or why they're visiting the hotel. Like things like that can be used for personalization.
Okay, great. Um, you may have touched a little bit on this earlier, but I do have a question here. What are the risks that exist if the hotel skips the proper data migration um, or audit steps so that they can just see the seriousness of this?
Yeah, so I mean, you could lose that data completely. Some software, once you switch to something else, you have no access to any of that data if you didn't back it up and migrate it over. So you would not have no guest data for your recurring guests or things like that. And then also you'd lose the ability to compare like year over year when you're looking at revenue management and business intelligence, from those sides. You're not going to be able to do any sort of comparisons.
Hmm. Have you ever had to help a hotel that's run into a problem like that, or?
In a previous role, yes, it did happen. They didn't let their uh, previous PMS know ahead of time or early
Mm.
enough that they were going to be migrating and need that data. And
Yeah.
so then it just kind of got turned off and they did lose access to it. So we can help them try to work with their other vendors to
Hmm.
data, but it's all dependent on what vendors are being used.
Okay. We're gonna shift gears to changing of management and the culture. What does change management mean to you in a hospitality setting?
Getting everyone on board and excited about the change. That's what, that's what's really important. All of, gathering the data is important, and making sure you're prepared on the technology side, super important, but getting people excited about it is what really helps with the changes, because then they want to do it.
Hmm. Is there anything specific that you implement to get them excited rather and engaged in the process?
Yeah, give them previews of what's coming, let them look at it, share what the upcoming processes are going to look like, and again, to show them how it's going to make things easier for them in the workplace.
Mhm. Okay, and how do you create a culture that embraces technology in hotels?
I mean, it's being, I guess, technology forward. Um,
Okay.
yeah, like, so show what's exciting about the technology, show what's helpful and useful about the technology, and use it yourself as a leader. You,
Hmm.
you want to be on the front line, using it right away as soon as you can, and be a person that people can ask questions to.
Great. I think that's very important when you said using it yourself
Yeah.
um, as a leader and not just saying but doing. Um, I would like to know, have you ever had to pause a project because they just weren't culturally ready for the changes?
Um, Not fully pause it because they weren't culturally, but maybe pause the rollout because they weren't ready for it. Typically, you finish the implementation, but if they're not ready, you may have to come back to it later on and to get
Hmm.
them on board, or have reschedule a training for a few weeks out to get people a little bit more enthusiastic.
Okay, because I was gonna ask what were some signs that kind of showed you that they were not culturally ready. So there was no enthusiasm, as you mentioned.
Yeah, people don't participate if you do have a training and nobody asks any questions. That is not usually a good sign.
Hmm.
People working in hotels are busy, so sometimes they're not answering because they're multitasking and doing a lot of things. But if nobody's asking any questions, that may be something that you want to come back and revisit and see if you need to maybe do another training or send some more information or do something to get them
And
more.
sorry to cut you off, but um, how do you kind of like introduce that idea? I mean, you don't. I know you don't just say like, "Hey, you guys aren't ready," but like, how do you convince them? I guess that they need a little bit more time to get ready.
If everything's ready for them technology wise, talking
Hmm.
with the stakeholders from the customer and just saying, do you feel like your team is ready? Ask them to get feedback from their team and discuss it that way.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. My next question for you is, how do you, speaking of talking to the leaders, how do you prepare them to model the adoption for the staff?
Yeah. So I always try to do a training with just the leaders first.
Okay.
Whether it's the stakeholders you've been working with throughout the implementation, or if you're bringing other, higher up people on board or anything like that. But getting the leaders trained first
Mm-hmm.
is really important because then they can talk to it as well. It's not just um, you're not the only one that knows how it works.
Okay. And so just so making sure that everyone is, I guess, as prepared as the next
Yeah.
across the board.
Hmm.
Okay. And how do you keep the morale high during this time, like during this stressful implementation period, and you have all of these different departments and parts? How do you keep the morale high?
I like to give updates, whether it's weekly or biweekly, on what's been accomplished, so they
Oh,
can
that's
see the
nice.
progress, what's happening
Hmm.
week over week, so they can see things are moving and getting accomplished, and that helps build excitement for what's coming as well.
Okay. And did you say you do this weekly?
Depends on the customer, but yeah, usually it's a weekly, and that way we can discuss everything that's happened in the last week. We can talk about any questions that they have. People
Hmm.
start getting access to the systems, even if it's not fully completed yet. So we can kind of do walkthroughs of the products, and as things are getting built, they can see, they can see what's happening. They can see the progress, and yeah, keeps them motivated, and yeah.
Nice. What project, speaking of the specific tools, what project management tools do you personally use when you're overseeing implementations?
Right now, I'm using Cantata,
Okay.
and I like the way that that works pretty well. I've also used Salesforce, which is great, and always fall back Excel when you're tracking very minute details of a project. Excel is actually really really helpful.
Yeah. What do you like most about the first two, about the cantata and
Cantata gives you a really good view of what tasks are outstanding in the project,
okay.
and you can assign people to them, and keep track of everything. It makes that part really easy.
Okay. And what are some of your favorite automation tools in hotel tech right now?
I have to plug my company a little bit, but Otelier, we offer, as I mentioned earlier, a paperless night audit, and a lot of that can
Hmm.
be automated, as well as payment processing and accounts payable options. We do business intelligence. We offer
Hmm.
um, forecasting and budgeting tools, and a lot of that can be automated and help you, yeah, keep track of your business and what you have to do at your property.
Okay, and which leads me to my next question: which platform or integration excites you the most right now? Would you plug yourself
Yeah, I would have to
plug
plug
yourself again?
it earlier. It's really great.
I mean, if it works and it's high quality, I mean,
Yeah,
it
something
speaks
that's
to
really great about it is it's especially great for hospitality management companies where you are managing hotels that are from different brands and independent, because we can
Mhm.
pull data from all of those different PMS sources into one place. So you're not going into On Q and PEP for your Hilton properties, and having to go to another system for Marriott, for Fosse, and going somewhere else for your choice hotels. It brings everything together in one place, as well
Mhm.
as all your other above property vendors, or your payroll and accounting systems and stuff. Speaking of accounting, another tool that I think is great, M3 is a really great partner for accounting, and
Mhm.
working with them.
Yeah, and then just having conversation with you, I think that with all that you're mentioning, one thing that we can assume is that they are organized and they're streamlined, and it helps makes communication very simple because we've learned that these are some of the things that are so important to you. So if you're using that, then yes, that we see that we get that from you. Um, My next question for you is, how do you see, thank you for sharing that, by the way. Thank you for sharing those. We hope that you were writing those down. My next question for you is, how do you see AI and automation shaping tech rollouts over the next 5 years?
Hmm. AI, I think, can be used for rolling it out. I mean, there's probably going to be a lot more like AI based training tools for
Okay.
that portion of implementations. A lot of, though, the implementation does require a human touch. I mean, there probably could be some things that could be more, I guess, AI or automated as far as importing information and things like
Mhm.
that. Um, Yeah, and I'm sure AI could be brought in other places, and there's definitely going to be a lot more AI tools for the hotels coming, I think, in the next few years.
Okay, and what's an underrated, I guess, tool that you believe that every hotel should consider adopting in this year or the next coming year?
Paperless night audit. It's awesome.
Hmm.
It saves in so many ways for the hotel, not just time, but you have to, most hotels have to keep their night audit reports for 7 years for audit purposes. And
Hmm.
that takes up a lot of boxes if you're printing them out every night, or a
Yeah.
lot of storage space on a computer. And it's not just storage, it's buying all of that paper, buying all the ink, maintaining your printer. If you can switch to a paperless night audit with cloud storage, it's going to save you space, it's going to save you time, and it's going to save money.
Okay. What would you say are, I guess, I mean, first of all, you've been so gracious to answer so many questions, and um, what would you say are some, I guess, some key notes that you want to really stress on? I think I brought up communication
Yeah,
for you. I
communication,
brought up communication
communication.
for you many times, but is there anything that you would? That's what I'm receiving from this, really, and I think that our audience is getting. So I don't know if that was your the main thing that you wanted to stress, but
Yeah,
that's what we're getting a
yeah,
lot.
and
So.
I mean, it really is. The communication part is so important, and that and knowing what you need and what you already have when you're doing an implementation is the other thing that, or the other two things that are just so, so important. You need to have all of that information to really be successful.
Knowing what you need, knowing what you have ahead of time. You mentioned doing. I guess that's part of the doing of your research.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
doing
Yeah.
doing ample research before it as well. And you also mentioned stressing the training, stressing the communication of letting people know what's going to be happening. I guess once you made that decision,
Yeah.
and stressing that the communication of the training across the departments. Correct. That's what.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to go, oh, by the way, next week we're starting with this new system that you have to learn and figure it out before, that's
Mhm.
not going to get good buy-in. It's not going to really be great for morale if it's sprung on people. But at the same time, you don't want to tell them 6 months before and then not mention it again for 5 months. And then they're like, oh,
Mhm.
I forgot all about this.
And did you also say that it's best to go to the leaders of the departments first? Correct.
Yeah, you want leadership buy-in first,
Buy-in.
absolutely, because they're the ones that are going to get the information to their teams, and if they are knowledgeable, they can help their teams learn, and they can help their teams feel excited about it.
Okay. And so I'm kind of going through that process for our audience again. So getting the leadership to buy in, and again, the buy in. It's you're getting opinions. It's a buy in, but it's not a buy in.
Yeah, you want opinions, but
It's a buy-in, but it's more of a preparation buy-in. Like
yeah,
prepare yourself to be
this
bought
is
in.
happening, but
Prepare
I'd like to
yourself to
hear
be
your
bought
opinion.
in. Okay, so prepare the leaders to be bought in, and then um, constant communication and training and using it themselves for everybody else in the department.
Yeah,
And another thing that you mentioned that I thought was so important is the weekly updates.
yes,
Weekly updates
yeah,
and showing that it's working, whether they because that also helps them buy in as well. They may not see the big picture, but
yeah,
week by week they see the little progresses.
yeah. Even if it's incremental, they're seeing some
They're
sort.
seeing the progress. Awesome, awesome. I mean, is there anything else I missed? I mean, I've learned a great deal. If I can understand this, then I know that the companies and the hotels, they could definitely, if they are looking to make these changes. I mean, I know that what I get from you is that you make things very, very simple. You make things
Yeah, I mean, that's the
stress
goal, to make it as simple and easy to understand as possible.
yeah. So thank you once again for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I mean, you're a wealth of knowledge, and like I said to everyone, clearly Miss Jaclyn, she takes the stress out. I mean, who doesn't want better communication? Who doesn't want streamlined? Who doesn't want all of the things that she mentioned? And again, she is the implementation. This is why she's the implementation project manager at Otelier. And so we can definitely. Can you let us know how we can get in touch with you, because we are getting ready to actually wrap up on the show? Can you give us a little information on how we?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. If anybody needs to reach out, and yeah, you can find me there. It's Jaclyn D'Angelo.
Okay, you heard it here first. So we are going to go ahead and I just wanted to make sure and just look at any extra questions that I have for you, making sure that I did not miss anything. And I don't think I did. Is there anything that you would like to touch on? Something that you're like,
No, just technology can be really exciting. I know sometimes it's daunting and you worry about it, but there's so many tools out there that can make your job in the hotels, if that's where you are, so much easier. And like I said, get you back to what you want to be doing, and that's working with your customers. Not just sitting behind your desk or hiding in the back office somewhere. There's so many tools that are there. And as well, but help you delight your customers. That's really what it's about. As working in hospitality, we really love people.
mm-hmm.
Great, because you're working with people all the time, and so that's what you want to be focused on, not data points.
That's true. Do you have any encouraging words that you can share with our students who have joined us tonight?
Hospitality is a really great career. I worked in hotels, as I said, for about 13 years or so, and I left working in hotels, but still really enjoy working with people, with hospitality people. Hospitality people are fun. So I think you made a good choice in hospitality.
Awesome. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. It shows that while you are in this industry. I can't say thank you enough, but again, thank you once again. And again, before we conclude tonight's episode, if you are interested in partnering and supporting our mission in connecting hospitality and technology and continuing to help our students, please reach out once again at hospitalitytechshow@gmail.com. We want to say thank you. And unfortunately, Michael was not able to join us for tonight's episode, but next month, during the next episode, he will be back for that, for those of you who missed him and were asking about him. So join us the next episode. All students, share it with your family, your friends, students, anyone who is interested in the hospitality industry. And once again, you can contact Ms. Jaclyn at, like she said, on her LinkedIn. And so once again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you to our students for joining us. Thank you for our audience. Thank you for your questions. And thank you for everything. And we're going to say good night on that. We'll see you next time. We will be in touch, hopefully. Thank you. Have a great night.
Hey, I'm Jaclyn D'Angelo, Implementation Project Manager at Otelier. I'm excited to join Hospitality Tech Show, Inc., a 501c3 nonprofit, live on Sunday, July 6th at 5 p.m. Eastern. We'll talk about innovation, technology, and real-world solutions for hospitality. If you're a student, a young entrepreneur, or a hospitality professional who loves technology, this is for you. Join us live on YouTube. You don't want to miss it.